Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we will learn something about the on-click listener. Now in the previous few lectures we have already learned how to handle the button clicks by using the on-click. That is, you could basically go ahead, go into the properties of a button, go into the on-click property, and you could pass in a particular method for the on-click of that particular button. And what that actually does is that when you click the button, whatever method specified in the on-click of that button will get executed. Now there is one more way of handling the button clicks, and that is basically by using the on-click listener. So in this tutorial we are going to learn exactly the same. That is basically how to go ahead and add an on-click listener to a particular button. So if you go to the main activity right here, what we will do is that we will have a text view over here, and we are going to have a button over here. And when the user actually clicks that particular button, what is going to happen is that the text of this text view is going to change to button clicked. So we used to do this by using the on-click method of that particular button, but in this case we are going to do this using the on-click listener. So let's first go ahead and add a text view over here. So this is going to be a text view. So let me just type in text view, and let's say this is going to be wrap content and wrap content. And let's say we place some placeholder over here, or let's say we assume some hint like, let's say hi there, or instead of having a hint we could have some text over here, which is the initial text. So let's say we type Android text, and let's say this says hello, and let's assign it ID, and let's type ID equals, let's say, text view. Okay, so once our text view is in place, the next thing which we do is that we add up a button here. So we type button, and the width is going to be wrap content and the height is going to be wrap content, and let's say this button says click here. So we specify the text as click here. Now in previous cases it was alright if you didn't assign some ID to this particular button, but since we are using the on-click listener, we do need to have an ID for this button. So let's say we assign it an ID. So we type ID equals @+ID, and let's say the ID of this button is my button. Okay, so once we have this thing set up, the next thing which you need to do is that you obviously need to place it at the center. So we type in the layout center horizontal equals true, which is going to set it up center, which is going to set it up in the center horizontally. And also let's say we want to set it up in the center vertically. So we type Android layout center vertical equals true as well. Now as you could see, the button is placed right in the center, and now let's say you also want to place this text view in the center as well. So we type center horizontal equals true. That should be horizontal actually. So let me just change that, and let's say the margin from the top is going to be, let's say 200 dps, or let's say 100 dp, and let's say the size of this text is going to be 30 dps. Okay, so once we have this thing, we pretty much have the setup for our app. Now the next thing which we need to do is that we need to learn how to apply the on-click listener to this particular button right here. So in order to do that, we go inside the main activity, and inside the onCreate method right below set content view, we go right here, and the first thing which we do is that we get a reference to the button. Now whenever you actually want to go ahead and access or get access to the elements, you always need to reference them by using their IDs. So we type button, and let's say this is going to be button equals, let's typecast it with button, then we use find view by ID r.id, and the ID which we have assigned to the button is my button. So now once we have an access to this button, what we could do is that we could go ahead and add an on-click listener to this button. So in order to add an on-click listener, we type button, which is basically the button name which we have over here. So button, then we give a dot operator, and then we type set on-click listener. And in here, in this on-click listener, what we do is that we go inside it and we create the actual listener and the method for that listener. So what this is actually going to do is that once the on-click listener is set, you do need to define what is going to happen if the user is going to click this button. So we create the on-click listener here by typing new button, and this is going to be dot on-click listener. And inside this listener, we are going to specify a method. So let's say we name this method as onClick. So we type public void, and this is going to be onClick. And we are going to pass in a view here. So that's going to be view v. And in this method is going to be the code which is going to get executed when we basically click the button. Now, when we click the button, what we essentially want to do is that we want to change the text views text which is present over here. So what we will do here is that we will get a reference to the text view. So we will type text view equals, and we will typecast it with text view, and then type find view by id r.id dot, and the text view's id is text view itself. So we pass it in over here. And now to basically set the text of the text view, we type text view dot set text, and to this you could pass in, let's say, button clicked. Okay, so once this thing is done, we are pretty much good to go. So now what we will do is that we will save this code and run this application on our device. So as you could see, the application is up and running, and we have the text view and the button. So when I essentially hit this button, as you could see, it says button click. So that's how we basically go ahead and create an application in which you could go ahead and add an on-click listener to a particular button. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys were able to understand how to go ahead and use an on-click listener on a particular button so that you could go ahead and handle click events related to a particular button. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.